Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And today, my goodness, President Joe Biden, the most progressive president in modern America, has confirmed that he is going to be nominating a black woman to the Supreme Court. Judge Breyer is on his way out. Many people were speculating about what this president was going to do. There was a hint that this is the direction he was going to go into when he was running for office, and boom, he confirmed it. So today's a pretty important day because a judge who's been on the Supreme Court for 40 years is now going to be leaving, and we got to break that down. President Biden and Judge Stephen Breyer were in a event this afternoon, press conference, where they were talking about what was happening. I'm taking a look at the locals chat. Doesn't seem like it's working. All right, and so we're going to have to take a look at that in a minute. What else are we talking about, though? President Biden and Judge Breyer were out there today having a little bit of a press release, didn't take any questions, but just sort of announced and commemorated the end of the term and the end of his tenure. And so we're going to bounce around on that press conference and see what's happening there before we take a look at some of the politics and the aftermath of this whole thing, because Jen Psaki was out in front of the press. They're asking her all sorts of questions. Who's the nominee going to be? And so we're going to see how the White House is approaching this, because this is kind of a unique moment in history. You know, we sort of haven't had anybody come out before and declare openly who the nominee is going to be, sort of based on gender and race. And so this is kind of a new thing that's happening. And Jen Psaki's got a couple questions about that. And a couple senators are actually speaking out about this, some in support, and some have some other questions about it. And so we're going to hear from McConnell. We're going to hear from Hirono. We're going to hear from Susan Collins. We're going to read over an article from Charlie Sykes over at the Bulwark, which, you know, is sort of critical of this idea that the Biden administration is making a pick in this manner. Chuck Schumer is promising to get this whole thing passed immediately, like as soon as humanly possible, drive it through. And we're going to break down why that might be, because it sounds like there's some pretty good precedent to say that Kamala Harris can't break a tie if it turns into a 50-50 split. And so we've got some prognosticating to do here. Need to decide whether, you know, are the Republicans going to try to impede this nomination, or are they going to just kind of, you know, let it go through because it really doesn't change the power of the court? We'll have to break that down and see. And so, of course, today, my friends, if you want to be a part of the show, Super Chats come in on YouTube. They show up like this right on the screen. If it shows up now, please. That was from Monster One. This one, okay, so that's not working either. So everything is just basically broken over here today. So let me just fix that here. I think I know what the problem was there. Monster One submitted a super chat yesterday when we were talking about the Supreme Court stuff. And there it is. So that's what happens on YouTube. And over on Locals, we have a form that looks like this. So I sent out a notice, Locals, if you're over there. We have a chat thread that's taking place. So drop your comments down in the comment thread below. I spent a lot of time on Telegram yesterday, learning a little bit more about that platform, and I think it's going to be a good solution for our community moving forward, but I just haven't built it out yet. So stand by, stay tuned for that. All right, so enough of that. Let's get into it. Judge Stephen Breyer, U.S. Supreme Court, sent a letter over to the White House and said, "Dear Mr. President, kind of had enough of this gig. Been up here for like 37, 40 years, about as long as you've been around. And, you know, it's time for me to retire. Not trying to say that you should, but, you know, it might be worth thinking about." Here's what the letter said. Written January 27th, the day of this recording, says the president, "Dear Mr. President, I'm writing to tell you that I have decided to retire from regular active judicial service as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States and to serve under the provisions of the U.S. Code." Now pay close attention. See if you can see any typos in this. "I intend this decision to take effect when the court rises for the summer recess this year, typically late June or July, assuming by then that my successor has been nominated and confirmed." So as soon as we get a nominee, then it's like the baton gets handed over to Chuck Schumer and the Democrats got to drive it through. Breyer says, "I enormously appreciate the privilege of serving as part of the federal judicial system. Nearly 14 years as the Court of Appeals and then 28 years on the Supreme Court. I found the work challenging and meaningful. My relations with each of my colleagues have been warm and friendly throughout. I've been aware of the great honor of participating as a judge in the effort to maintain our Constitution and the rule of law. Yours sincerely, Stephen Breyer. So you can see him here from the press conference that he had with the president. And we're going to cut through a couple clips from what happened today. A couple interesting things happened. Let's just dive into it, shall we? So here's how it started. We're going to clip from CBS. CBS is showing us that we got the president over here along with Breyer walking in, both masked up. Now, Joe Biden does something kind of humorous with the mask at the end of this whole presentation, but let's listen in. It is an important day, you know, to say that this guy's been on there for a long time and he's transitioning out. So let's watch it for a little bit.
The president now entering the room. I know you've been talking to your Hill sources, so stand by. First, the president of the United States.
All right, so watch that mask.
And begin by recognizing.
I think he puts it under something. Under
Dr.
something
Breyer,
there. It's going to come back.
Dr.
We're going to come back to that mask.
And for being here. And I can't tell you, this is sort of a bittersweet day for me. Justice Breyer and I go back a long way, all the way back to the mid-'70s when he first came on the Judiciary Committee, but that's another story. I'm here today to express the nation's gratitude to Justice Stephen Breyer for his remarkable career of public service and his clear-eyed commitment to making our country's laws work for its people. And our gratitude extends to Justice Breyer's family for being partners in his decades of public service.
All right. So you can see, right, kind of the standard stuff, intro, and it is a big deal. You know, being a judge, I'm sure, is a tremendous amount of work. And so, yes, thank you for your service. Disagree with probably every one of your opinions, but that's okay. Appreciate your contributions to the country. Now, all of that is well and good. President Biden goes through and says he did this and he was served this way and did all of these great things. We're going to fast forward through all of that. You know, he's a good man. He's been doing this for a long time. Okay, so what happens next? Joe Biden is going to give us a hint now and tell us a little bit more about what is coming up next. Who is his nominee going to be? And how is this whole process going to unfold from the White House's perspective? Here is what Joe Biden says.
A few words about the critically important work of selecting his successor. Choosing someone to sit in the Supreme Court, I believe, is one of the most serious constitutional responsibility a president has.
That's good. It's in the Constitution.
Our process is going to be rigorous. I will select a nominee worthy of Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence and decency. While I've been studying candidates' backgrounds and writings, I've made no decision except one.
One.
The person I will nominate will be someone with extraordinary qualifications, character, experience, and integrity. And that person will be the first black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court.
Wow.
It's long overdue in my view. I made that commitment during the campaign for president, and I will keep that commitment. I will fully do what I said I'd do. I will fulfill my duty to select a justice, not only with the Senate's consent, but with his advice. You've heard me say in other nomination processes that the Constitution says seek the advice and consent, but the advice as well of the Senate. I'm going to invite senators from both parties to offer their ideas.
Yeah, so he's going to go through and he's going to go through this very rigorous process where he's going to, be researching everything and reading and writing. And wasn't he a lawyer at some point in time, 45 years ago? And so, he's got a lot of people and a lot of due diligence that he needs to do. Now, as we're going to see, there are other people out there on sort of the other side of the aisle who are also, critical of this process because they're saying that it just automatically precludes an entire, swath of eligible candidates. We're going to see that from the Bulwark here as this continues. But this is the decision that they've made. Joe Biden is going to be telling us that a lot of people are going to be helping him and his administration come up with a list of nominees. Here is how that process is going to unfold from Joe.
Senate. I'm going to invite senators from both parties to offer their ideas and points of view. I'll also consult with leading scholars and lawyers. And I'm fortunate to have advising me in this selection process Vice President Kamala Harris.
Oh,
She's
great.
An exceptional lawyer, former Attorney General of the state of California, a former member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I will listen carefully to all the advice I'm given, and I'll study the records and former cases carefully. I'll meet with the potential nominees, and it is my intention to announce my decision before the end of February.
Before the end of February. So that's coming up pretty soon. We'll see how quickly they can get that done. That means that Chuck Schumer is going to get handed the ball, and then he's going to have to drive it in. And he's as we're going to see, he might have a little bit of a hurdle there. We'll see, because there are some Republican senators who are saying, no. We had a very rushed prior process when we were going through the Amy Coney Barrett situation. We're not going to do that again. So we'll see whether they stand by that or not. But we're going to come back and revisit this. Joe Biden, right, kind of making history. We know that every time that this, something like this happens, right, we're going to see headlines, historic, all over the place. And it is true, right? It would be actually historic. There's no doubt about that. But here is now sort of the outgoing associate judge who's going to be detailing more about, well, he's going to share a message with us on his way out. So watch this exchange. They do that awkward, handshake, fist bump thing on the way out, like trying to shake while you're fist bumping. It happens to everybody. You've been there. Here it is.
I yield the floor to you, Mr. Justice.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, so Joe's got his mask back now.
Terribly nice. And believe me, I hold it right here. It's wonderful. And I thought about what I might say to you, and I'd like to say something I enjoy is talking to high school students, grammar school students, college students, even law school students, and they'll come around and ask me what is it you find particularly meaningful about your job? What sort of gives you a thrill? And that's not such a tough question for me to answer. It's the same thing. Day one almost, up to day I don't know how many, but what I say to them is, look, I sit there on the bench, and after we hear lots of cases. And after a while, the impression, it takes a while, I have to admit, but the impression you get is, as you well know, this is a complicated country. There are more than 330 million people, and my mother used to say it's every race, it's every religion, and she would emphasize this, and it's every point of view possible.
Okay, so I'm not real sure what he said there. To be honest, because he's kind of just meandering through, I think, a stream of consciousness thought that's coming out. But let's check back in and see what he's going to tell, because he has a specific point he's going to try to make, I think, here in a minute. Let's see if we can parse this out.
And when the students get too cynical, I say, go look at what happens in countries that don't do that. And that's there. I can't take this around in my job. People have come to accept this Constitution.
We have come to accept
the importance of a rule of law.
Yeah.
And I want to make another point to them. I want to say, look, of course people don't agree, but we have a country that is based on human rights, democracy, and so forth. But I'll tell you what Lincoln thought, what Washington thought, and what people today still think. It's an experiment. It's an experiment. That's what they said. And Joanna paid each of our grandchildren a certain amount of money to memorize the Gettysburg Address. And the reason that what we want them to pick up there, and what I want those students to pick up, if I can remember the first two lines, is that 407 years ago, our fathers brought up, created upon this here a new country, a country that was dedicated to liberty and the proposition that all men are created equal, conceived in liberty, those are his words, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He meant women too. And we are now engaged in a great civil war.
Civil war?
To determine whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. See, those are the words I want to see. An experiment. And that's what he thought. It's an experiment. And I found some letters that George...
So it just goes on like that for like another 4 or 5 minutes, I think. So at the end of it, I don't know what the conclusion is or what the message was. It sort of feels like it feels like, somebody you kind of run into at the coffee shop and they're like, oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've heard from you. What's been going on? And he's like, well, you have no idea, but I've got these grandkids now and, they're interested in the Constitution. I was telling them about Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address. And, it's been nice talking to you, but I got to go now. And that other person just keeps talking and talking and talking. And so, between the two of these guys, between Biden and Breyer, my goodness, that's two pillars at the head of our federal branches of government. Yikes. All right. So let's see what else we've got. Now, here's Joe Biden. Watch this little mask exchange. So they did the little weird hand thing. And then I think Joe Biden gets tired of his mask. And so he's like, hey, Breyer, hold on to my mask for me. And then Breyer, who already had a mask on, puts the mask in his pocket real fast so nobody knows it because he doesn't want the press to see. So he's covering for old Biden there. Watch this.
It surprised you that that's the thought that comes into my mind today? I don't know, but thank you.
Okay. Get a handshake there now.
Doctor,
that's good.
I don't know that you've ever been to the White House in the Lincoln bedroom, but I invite both of you to come and stay. The Lincoln bedroom has, against the wall between the windows looking out, a handwritten copy of the Gettysburg Address written by Lincoln in that bedroom, allegedly, as I said, the sitting room. And so you got to come and see it. And even if you can't come and stay, bring your grandchildren so they can see it as well.
Bring your kids to the grand house.
Thank you all so very much for being here. And I'm not going to take any questions because I think it's inappropriate to take questions with the justice here. He's still sitting on the bench, and I'm going to give you your mask back. And but you'll have plenty of opportunities to get me later today. And
what mask was that? Whose mask was that?
Next week too. So thank you very much.
Where'd that mask come from?
In deference to the moment.
And they're the president of the United States.
All right, so no questions, of course, from Biden. Look, I don't know what the mask was for. It was just maybe a simple mistake, but very curious. That's, look, at least we can all rest assured at night knowing that both our executive branch under the steadfast leadership of Joe Biden and the Supreme Court, although he's exiting and retiring, he's still over there holding the fort down, Stephen Breyer. We're in good shape now. And we haven't even talked about Nancy Pelosi over in the House of Representatives yet. My goodness. Okay, so let's take a listen now to Jen Psaki. Jen Psaki is going to come out. The press, these little vultures are like, hey, Jen, who's it going to be? We know that you basically narrowed it down to, we can start to speculate because you very, very, narrowly limited the pool. And so we've got a lot of questions about this. So Jen comes out and says, hey, you vultures, take it easy for a minute. We haven't even gotten started on this. The announcement just took place yesterday. I know we leaked this yesterday to everybody else, but today was the official announcement. And so here's Jen responding to the questions of the press.
We also should be clear about some of the games that we're already seeing indications of out there. We have not mentioned a single name. We have not put out a list. The president made very clear he has not made a selection. And there are, if anyone is saying they plan to characterize whoever he nominates after thorough consideration with both parties as radical before they know literally anything about who she is, they just obliterated their own credibility. So our intention is to not play games. The president's intention is to consult with members of both parties. And his intention is to nominate a qualified candidate who, after completing a rigorous process, who is worthy of the excellence and decency of Breyer's legacy. And then the foreign policy.
All right. So, not sort of making sure that the press is at arm's length here. Hey, we're just getting started, haven't nominated anybody yet, but we're going to make sure they're highly qualified and you're going to like them. And so now we start to get some questions about, the specific character, the specific race, right? The specific ethnicity of a person. They're not talking about character or credentials. That's part of it. But sort of the headline of this whole announcement has been first black woman ever. And Joe Biden, I think, even used that phrase. And so somebody in the press is asking Jen Psaki about this. They're saying, hey, Jen, interesting, kind of hasn't happened before. Have a question for you. Is this just virtue signaling from your administration? Is this just you sort of trying to change the subject or do something that is maybe, has an ulterior motive kind of a thing. Here is how that sounded today with Jen.
Members of the Senate.
Go ahead. Just to put a little bit of finer point on what you just got to at the end of that. There have already been conservative commentators talking a bit about
not just conservatives.
Why a black woman that's to commit to that is reverse racism or some kind of signaling, of virtue signaling or something like that. What do you say to people who are saying that is, an inappropriate way to set out prerequisites for who he's going to choose?
Well, first we'd say that the fact that no black woman has been nominated shows a deficiency of the past selection processes, not a lack of qualified candidates to be nominated to the Supreme Court. I'd also note, I've heard that some conservatives may be fans of President Reagan, former President Reagan, and when he nominated Sandra Day O'Connor, he said, quote, Judge O'Connor's confirmation symbolizes the richness of opportunity that still abides in America. Opportunity that permits persons of any sex, age, or any race from every section and every walk of life to aspire and achieve in a manner never before even dreamed about in human history. I'd also note, if you look at the president's own record, not only has he nominated the highest number of black women to serve on the circuit court and the appellate court, but he has also nominated across the board the highest level of Ivy League nominees, right? He has nominated a broad sway of extremely qualified, experienced, and credentialed nominees, and done that by also making them incredibly diverse. And so the president's view is that it is long past time to have a black woman on the Supreme Court, and that it, again, reflects challenges or deficiencies in the past processes.
Challenges or deficiencies in the past processes. So I don't really know what she's getting at with all of that, other than to sort of, I think there was an idea that they were separating the analysis into an ethnicity, racial component, and a qualification component. And I think she's trying to say we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be sort of assembling them together. There's plenty of eligible candidates, I think is what she was saying, and the past precedent shouldn't be future prospective, something like that. I don't know really where she was going with that, but here is what else she had to say about Kamala Harris. So she's now talking about Vice President Kamala Harris. Many people suspecting, oh my gosh, what if it was SCOTUS Associate Justice Kamala Harris? That might be interesting. We'll put a pin in that and come back to that in a minute. But here's Psaki now saying, yeah, Kamala is going to be pretty involved in this whole process.
The vice president will play a central role in this process, and the president intends to consult with her very closely. Obviously, she has a long history as a former attorney general, as a member of the Judiciary Committee, and he respects her opinion greatly. In addition to the vice president, Ron Klain will, of course, play a role. Dana Remus, Cedric Richmond, Paige Herwig, who's a member of our counsel's office, and Louisa Terrell.
Ron Klain, one of the most useless, ineffective chief of staffs that we've seen in modern American history, given the results this administration has been able to eke out, is going to be involved in this, along with Kamala Harris, along with Joe Biden. And so people are starting to speculate, is it going to be a moderate? Is it going to be somebody who is far, far on the left? Because you have to start now considering the Republican votes. Because remember, the balance of power in the Senate, it's 50-50. Kamala Harris is that split vote. So what happens if you don't get a single Republican to cross over the aisle? What happens if you get every single Democrat, Manchin and Sinema, and you get the two independents, the guy from Maine and the socialist Sanders? If you get all of them voting for this nominee, which they should, but you nominate somebody who is a ultra-left person, what happens? Maybe you get all of the Republicans in unison to vote against the nominee. And now you've got a 50-50 split. And so there's a theory that in a case like this, that the vice president, Kamala Harris, would be the tiebreaker, just like what happened in a regular bill. But this is not a regular bill. This is a judicial nomination and appointment. The rules are a little bit different. We're going to revisit that as well. But let's see now, since they have to factor that into the equation now because, well, it's not, they don't have a landslide in the Senate. They might need some Republicans. Jen Psaki just told us that she's not going to be playing any games on any of this here. They're very serious people. but they might have to. Here is a question from the press asking her about this specifically. You might need some Republicans.
The question of whether or not that person could earn support from Republicans isn't likely to be an influencing factor as he picks among the possible qualified candidates?
Well, I don't think we should buy into that game playing, and I don't think the president believes that. You know, if you look at what the president has committed to, nominating the first African-American woman, it's been over 230 years, as we know, since the Supreme Court came into being. A black woman has never served on it. And the president's view is that anyone who's saying that that's not possible, or we can't find the most eminently qualified person,
Nobody said that.
That's ludicrous. I mean,
Nobody
that's
said that.
suggesting that black women should not be a part of the most important court in our nation, that there
Nobody's
aren't black
saying
women
that.
who have distinguished themselves by rising to the top of the legal profession
Nobody's
with the
saying
strongest
that.
credentials imaginable. There are. Many of you are reporting different lists of names of many potentially qualified candidates.
Oh my gosh. Nobody's saying that, Jen. Good Lord. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's going like, wow, oh, great. You know, this is going to be horrible. Nobody said that. People just have a question of you sort of pre-selecting, you know, using that as a qualifier. That's all. But they're not saying that they're not qualified. Oh, all right. So once we do get a nominee, and they're going to have to consider some of this stuff, the balance of power in the Senate. We heard that Jen is sort of, you know, having to hem and haw about some of these Republican votes, not going to play any games. We'll see about that. Chuck Schumer, you can see here from CNN, according to Manu Raju, says that as soon as they get that nominee boy, there is going to be a quick timeline to confirm the Supreme Court pick. Very similar to Barrett's process. Remember how quick that was? They got that done rapid speed. After a series of defeats, Senate Democrats may soon deliver a win. Chuck Schumer looking at a quick time frame to confirm the new nominee. Senate sources say the Senate can act on the nominee before Stephen Breyer officially steps down from the court. So they don't have to wait until July or August or whenever the term actually ends, when they go into their summer recess. So Democrats expect to hold hearings very soon. The late Justice Ginsburg died on September 18th, and Barrett was nominated on September 26th. Okay, did you see that? That is like Operation Warp Speed from Donald Trump, September 18th to September 26th. That's rapid speed. And then she was confirmed on October 26th, just days before the election, prompting Democratic anger. So they're going to try to follow something similar to that. Basically, after the nomination, she was confirmed within the month. So now people are speculating, right? They're saying, well, hold on a minute. You know, President Biden is taking his sweet time now because it's all of February. But again, there was a vacancy in the Amy Coney Barrett case where there's not a vacancy in this case. Right, so there was a little bit more urgency when it came to Amy Coney Barrett, but this is a planned retirement. It's not a death like Ruth Bader Ginsburg was. Senate Democrats are confident that whomever Biden picks is going to get confirmed, according to senior Democratic sources. That's because of both the math and the history. Since the Senate GOP leader pushed through a change in the filibuster rules, it just requires a party line, simple majority vote to advance the Supreme Court. Okay, right? Simple majority. But this is the balance of power that we can see now in the Senate. And they don't have a majority, do they? Well, they do if you add in Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris, of course, is the tie-breaking vote. And so if a regular bill comes in front of the Senate, Kamala can go and break the tie. But that's not what we're talking about, because this is not a regular bill. And so there's a big question that comes up now. What happens if the Republicans dig their heels in and decide that they are not going to confirm this nominee? Because let's face it, they've got an election coming up. The Senate might switch over to the Republicans by the end of the next year. So if they can dig their heels in, maybe they get somebody who absolutely is a moderate. We'll see. Or do they want to fight over it? So there's a big question. It's an open legal question. What happens if there is, in fact, a 50-50 split? What happens if this looks like this? Republicans say not going to vote for the nominee. Democrats say yes. Can Kamala Harris break the tie? Can she actually do anything about it? Jen Psaki got asked about it, didn't have the specifics on it because it's an open question. Now, there's this lawyer, this guy by the name of Lawrence H. Tribe. You can see him pictured here with Obama. Very, very big constitutional scholar, kind of a lefty guy. And he wrote this article back in September 23rd, 2020. Guess who was in charge then? Yeah, Donald Trump was. And so Lawrence Tribe, this fella, he writes this article back then. He says, no hiding behind Pence's skirt on the Supreme Court nomination, right? He says the vice president doesn't have the power to break a tie on the appointment. Okay? So when a similar situation happened, this guy came out and said, you couldn't do it. So now he's actually written that he probably would stand by that. But here's the reasoning that he gives us. He says, this is what he wrote back when he was talking about Mike Pence. He says, while the vice president has the power to cast a tie-breaking vote to pass a bill, the Constitution does not give him power to break ties when it comes to the Senate's advice and consent role. Don't take my word for it. Go back to the Federalist Papers. Federalist number 69 says, then, in the national government, if the Senate should be divided, no appointment could be made. Hamilton contrasted that rule with how appointments worked back then in the home state in New York, where the governor actually did have the power to break ties to confirm nominations. So he was contrasting that. Hamilton's view back then is confirmed by the structure of the Constitution. As a structural matter, the provision that gives the vice president power to break ties is located in Article 1, which addresses the legislative power. Article 1. By contrast, the Senate advice and consent rule is in Article 2, making it a form of power wielded by the Senate that is executive, not legislative in nature. The vice president has some power to influence legislation by casting the tie, while the Senate has some power to influence executive appointments. By granting or withholding the consent structurally, the vice president cannot smuggle his Article 1 legislative tie-breaking power into Article 2 to undermine the Senate's unique role under Article 2 executive power of advice and consent. Complicated way of saying separation of powers precludes the vice president from casting a tie-breaking vote on a judicial appointment. Separation of powers. Now, it doesn't say that in the Constitution specifically, but because they categorized it in the right aisle of constitutional provisions, that's where it belongs. Right? You can't take something from the frozen food section and put it in the bakery, or vice versa. They have to go where they belong. And so that's what he says. And now his party's in that position. And so I did see that he says, he posted somewhere that, not happy about this situation, but I think I'll stand by what I wrote back then because it's probably right. So we'll see if that changes and follow it along. Now that we know that the Senate is sort of in this position where, hey, the Republicans could really actually throw a wrench in this whole thing if they wanted to, which I doubt they will. Let's poke around and see what the senators have to say, because we do have to talk about the advice and consent of the Senate. Mitch McConnell, Cocaine Mitch, the turtle, is here, says McConnell on Justice Breyer's announcement. I congratulate Justice Breyer, nearly 3 decades of thoughtful and consequential service, capping 40 plus years of total service on the federal bench. He commands respects, intelligence, rigor, good faith, exemplary honor, even in the face of undue criticism. So it's all just a big, nice statement. Says, I congratulate him on the next chapter. Looking ahead, the American people elected a Senate that is evenly split at 50-50. To the degree that President Biden received a mandate, it was to govern from the middle, steward our institutions, and unite America. The president must not outsource this important decision to the radical left. The American people deserve a nominee with demonstrated reverence for the written text of our laws and our Constitution. Okay, none of this active liberty garbage. None of this, the Constitution is a living, breathing document that should change dynamically with the times, and your rights are relative to the consequences that you face in the world. All nonsense. What he's saying here, we prefer a nominee who just goes back to the text. What they wrote down there, it's kind of what it means. And so how about that? Here is what Cocaine Mitch had to say about it.
So look, I'm going to give the president's nominee, whoever that may be, a fair look and not predict on today, when we don't even know who the nominee is, how I might vote. Okay, thanks.
Look at those eyes, man. He's rolling right now. He's ready to go. This is going to be a Senate battle because you can see it right in the eyes of Cocaine Mitch. Now, Senator Joe Manchin says that I take my constitutional responsibility to advise and consent on a nominee to the Supreme Court very seriously. I look forward to meeting with and evaluating the qualifications of President Biden's nominee to fill the vacancy. Also congratulates Judge Breyer, says he's dedicated much of his life to the rule of law. I wish him a happy and fulfilling retirement. So there you go. Now, the turtle Mitch McConnell, of course, is going to, put up a little bit of a fight. We'll see how strong it is. Because often what happens is we've got some of these mushy Republicans that are sort of in the middle of the aisle. People like Mitt Romney and Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. Is she still a Republican or did she switch? I can't tell. Who knows? But there are some of these squishy Republicans that always go, all right, I got to just roll over and do whatever the Democrats say because they come from very Democratic lefty states. But that's only traditionally when they've got a popular lefty president, like a Barack Obama, or a very anti-popular or unpopular, according to certain people, incumbent Republican president, right? When they can sort of play that maverick role, all of those things. And so this person, of course, Susan Collins, is saying things that are a little bit adversarial to what Chuck Schumer was saying. Chuck Schumer came out and said specifically, we've got to steamroll this thing. We got to get this thing in and done. But Collins is saying, hold the gates there for a minute. Here's what she said.
As you know, I felt that the timetable for the last nominee was too compressed. This time, there is no need for any rush. We can take our time, have hearings, go through the process, which is a very important one. It is a lifetime appointment, after all.
All right, lifetime appointments, and she's going to go through a very rigorous process as well. Somebody asked in the chat, is that Ghislaine Maxwell? Did she get out of custody? No, that's Susan Collins. She's the senator, and so she's going to take her time, more or less, on this investigation. Manu Raju says, hey, that she said this. I felt the timetable on the last nominee was too compressed. Collins also told reporters in Maine yesterday that Durbin called her to, quote, to tell me that he will help to facilitate access not only to the nominee, but to materials or anything I need to guide my decision. And we talked a little bit about the timetable. So Durbin, of course, is a very Democrat, and he's already on the phone hitting his sort of mushy Republicans to see if they'll come over to his side. Collins, who voted for Kavanaugh but opposed Amy Coney Barrett, said it was too close to the election. Said of the process, quote, it involves extensive questionnaire, and so that takes a fair amount of time. So that's what Susan Collins is saying. Now, there's something interesting about Susan Collins because it sounds like she had already voted for one of the top candidates, which is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. And so if Biden nominates her, we've got several Republicans who've already voted for her. Senator Graham voted for her, Murkowski did, and Susan Collins did, right? So that would have been that. If you take those three and you add them to the 50 that the Democrats have, that's kind of a done deal. And they just did that last June, right? So it'd be kind of a weird thing if they nominate Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and then you've got Susan Collins and Murkowski and Lindsey Graham who are screaming from the rooftops, oh, we can't possibly vote for these people. Or for this woman, because they just did last year, like in June. So it kind of makes you think that maybe she is going to be the front runner. But that was only from a couple of the Republicans now, Collins, Murkowski, Graham. Let's take a listen to what Mazi Hirono has to say. She's a Democrat from Hawaii. How does she feel about this entire announcement? Here she is.
First of all, I would like to join, basically, I think our country in thanking Justice Breyer for his decades of service on behalf of the people of our country and the kind of judicial temperament that he brought and how he approached the decision making. And clearly, Ari, based on the what you just said, the segment just before. We have a number of really highly qualified black women, and I very much support President Biden's decision to put a black woman on the court. High time, about time.
Did you hear him? She goes through and he goes, all right, and goes on to the next person. And so she is somebody who's very interesting. Didn't Hirono, I'm sort of thinking about this, didn't Hirono say the wise, no, that was not her. Wise Latina. Remember where that came out when Sotomayor was going through this? I read Hirono, we're about to see a reprise of the Wise Latina episode. Okay, so maybe she did say that. I don't remember any of that, but I remember somebody said it. I don't remember if it was Hirono or somebody else, but that was an interesting nomination process as well. And so yesterday we played a little bit of the game of speculating. Well, okay, Joe Biden said he's going to nominate the first black woman ever. Hirono is very excited about that as well. Some people were speculating. Could this be Kamala Harris? Come on, nobody likes her. Are they going to actually vote for her to be on the Supreme Court? But some people, even though they were saying that's a little bit crazy, well, sometimes there's a little bit of logic to the madness. And so Bill Kristol, I don't know if this guy's joking or not. He's kind of devolved into a parody of himself, but he posted this on Twitter. He said, and it's kind of hilarious, says, straightforward from here, on June 30th, the court overturns Roe, okay? The current court with Breyer on the court. Breyer's on the court. It's a 6-3 decision, or let's say it's a 5-4 because one of the squishy Republicans joins the left. 5-4, Roe's overthrown. July 1, Breyer resigns after the termination of the summer recess. Breyer is over. He's angry. He says the court needs aggressive, progressive justices. Fast forward, July 4th comes around. It's America's holiday. Last time they said that the pandemic was over. They kind of botched that one. This time they're going to make it a little bit more exciting. Biden's going to come out and he's going to pick Kamala Harris for the Supreme Court. Why? Because Breyer is endorsing her, saying we need aggressive justices. Harris says, listen, America, I'm ready to take the call. I accept this honor. She resigns as vice president. On July 5th, President Biden picks Mitt Romney as vice president. Says national unity is needed for the world crisis. Mitt Romney joins the ticket knowing that at any minute Biden's going to croak, and then he is the new president. Fall, progressives are now energized by the bitter Senate fight. They confirm Harris, and a fierce state legislative battle over the choice happens. Centrists are reassured by the Biden-Romney national unity government. November 8th, Democrats have the best midterm for the party in power since 1934. That's from Bill Kristol. It's kind of a little fun fantasy fairy tale story. I don't think he's serious, but I don't know anymore. I really can't tell. Let's see. I think this one's also serious. David Fredoso over on Twitter says, appointing Harris kills 3 birds with 1 stone. Number 1, it gets rid of her permanently. Right? She's on the court. Ideologically reliable justice. She's going to be a lefty until the end of days. And number 3, it embarrasses her by forcing her to vote to break the tie on her own nomination in the Senate. Not saying Biden will do it, but those are 3 reasons he might. Number 3 would be a good one, wouldn't it? Because he just doesn't like her all that much. And so if she had to go and vote herself into the Supreme Court, that would just be really, would she do it? Of course she would, because she wants that. All right. And so we get some polls now. January 26th, a poll came out. President Biden promised during his campaign to nominate the first black woman to the Supreme Court. How important is it to you that Justice Breyer's successor is a black woman? And we see percentages of this. And it is looking like it is very important. It says Democrats and black Americans care the most about Biden keeping the promise. So of U.S. adults, not important at all, 33%. But we've got about, this looks like 39% there for U.S. adults. And so, kind of middle there. You can see big number of differences between black Americans and white Americans and Hispanic Americans, as you would sort of speculate. Democrats, gigantic difference there. Okay, Republicans, turns out like 13% think it's very important, whereas over 75% or so think that Democrats are in favor of something like this. And so it's split along party lines. Obviously, doesn't make anybody surprised to hear that. But is it publicly popular, sort of generally speaking? Charlie Sykes, he writes over at thebulwark.com, and he is saying this about Biden's litmus test. Says, we've got a pretty good idea of what Biden's shortlist looks like. We talked about several of these people, I think all of these actually people, Judge Jackson, Michelle Childs, and Leandra Kruger. Yesterday, we talked about 4 or 5, maybe 6 different women. The Atlantic tells us a bit about Jackson. She's 51, fills a lot of the different credentials, Ivy League credentials, law degree from Harvard, edited the Harvard Law Review, clerked for 3 federal judges, including Breyer. If nominated, she's going to follow the same track as Kavanaugh, who ultimately clerked for the judge that he replaced. Jackson would also be coming from the D.C. Circuit, which is the second most important court in the country after the Supreme Court. Okay, so that's sort of the training ground, the D.C. Circuit Court. So she's there. She hits all the credentials, right? Extremely impressive person. And Charlie Sykes notes that, says she and other shortlisters have solid credentials, and that should be the focus of the appointment confirmation process. Those things are what we should be focusing on. And Charlie Sykes writes, during the heat of the primary contest, Biden pledged that he would appoint to a black woman to the court. He appears committed to doing that. But in doing so, he may have done his own nominee a signal disservice by putting racial and gender identity ahead of philosophy and credentials. And that is a problem, he says. Now, we heard from Jen earlier saying, yes, other presidents have also made identity-based promises, and we'll go through those in a minute. But first, let's take a look at what Joe Biden said. We already reviewed this, I think, yesterday. But here was the promise that came from Joe.
We talked about the Supreme Court. I'm looking forward to making sure there's a black woman on the Supreme Court to make sure we, in fact, get every representation. Not a joke. I pushed very hard for that.
Not a joke. Okay, we got that. And so there have been other presidents that have done this. Reagan did it, said that he would name a woman to the Supreme Court. You can see this came over from some newspaper back in 1980. It says Ronald Reagan, striving to refute charges that he's insensitive to women's rights, said that he would name a woman to one of the first Supreme Court vacancies in my administration. It says it's time for a woman to sit among our highest jurists, Reagan said in prepared remarks. And he did, right? He kept his promise. We've got Sandra Day O'Connor. You can see here, Sandra Day O'Connor turned out to be somebody who wrote for the court in the Casey versus Planned Parenthood decision, which was that big decision that sort of modified the Roe versus Wade decision to now change it from the 3-trimester framework into the undue burden framework is really what that case did. And so Sandra Day O'Connor, somebody who was nominated by a conservative judge, was really the person who was part of that last decision on that issue, really, the Planned Parenthood case. So that's the history of what happened there. Now, I was taking a look because remember that President Bush, the first Bush, nominated Clarence Thomas. Trying to think of different analogies. Have we seen this before in the past? Like, did President Bush, I was just a boy, but did President Bush go out and promise that he's going to nominate an African-American man, a black man, right? Did he come out sort of like Joe Biden did and say, listen, it is time that we're going to put the first black man ever on the Supreme Court? Did he say that? I don't know. I mean, I wasn't around. I think I was around. When was he in office? I mean, I was not, cognizant of what was going on back then. But here, I went into Google and I tried to find this. I typed in President Bush promises to nominate black man. Basically, the same thing that Joe Biden did, right? Joe Biden promises to nominate black woman. And Google basically shows us nothing other than this Washington Post article from 1991. But this was after the fact, right? Bush yesterday chose Clarence Thomas, a conservative black federal appeals court judge. But everything else from Google is all about Biden. Biden's pledge. Biden promises, again, to nominate. Biden promises extraordinary Supreme Court nominee, first black woman, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I don't know that there is a direct analogy on at least the racial component, right? Reagan certainly did the first female, and this is, in a similar vein, but different. Reagan, says Charlie Sykes, kept his promise by appointing Sandra Day O'Connor. Bush was anxious to name an African American, picked Clarence Thomas. By now, this sort of, identity, gender politics is almost reflexive in progressive circles. But even its supporters, he writes, needs to recognize its limitations and its dangers. Over at the National Review, they wrote, in a stroke, Biden disqualified dozens of liberal and progressive jurists for no reason other than their race and gender. This is not a great start in selecting someone sworn to provide equal justice under the law. Remember the Equal Protection Act. Andrew Sullivan writes, the replacement will be chosen only after the field is radically winnowed by open race and sex discrimination, which have gone from being illegal to being celebrated and practiced by a president of the United States. Andrew Sullivan over at the Sully Dish. And so Sykes, right, who typically is not a crazy right-winger, says, go ahead, take umbrage at my citation of Sullivan and the reactionaries at the National Review. The commentary at Fox News is even worse, but that does not mean they are wrong, he writes. Warning a little bit. Saying, think about it this way. In announcing that his pick would be constrained by racial and gender identity, Biden did indeed tell a generation of young progressive jurists they need not apply. No one who looks like Stephen Breyer or William Brennan or Lawrence Tribe would be considered. But neither would Hispanics. No Hispanic women. No one who looks like Sonia Sotomayor is even going to be considered. Don't even submit your application. Thanks, though. Asians also need not apply. No Pakistani Americans, no men or women, no Native Americans, no black men. Black men, you're not applicable. Thanks, but no thanks. Not even Barack Obama would be eligible under these standards. Jews, he writes, probably not. And ditto for white women, of course. No credentials, no jurisprudence, no brilliant legal scholarships can override their racial identity. So you don't get Elena Kagan. Here's the kicker. Under these limits, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or rather the next generation Ruth Bader Ginsburg, would be ineligible for consideration. Why? Because of the color of her skin. From this very progressive administration. This very, very, very forward-thinking administration and ideology. I mean, it's not just the administration, it's the entire party. Charlie Sykes writes, progressives are just going to brush this off. They're going to say, quote, it's time, right? How many times do you hear that? Says, but we shouldn't be under any illusions about the political downsides of race-based selection processes, especially as the High Court itself is going to be taking up the issue of racial preferences shortly. Says, let me give you a reality check. The public really dislikes this sort of thing. Polls suggest that race-based hiring and admissions are not just unpopular, they are very unpopular. 2019 Pew Research survey found that most Americans, 73%, say colleges and universities should not consider race or ethnicity when making decisions about admissions. Just 7% say race should be a major factor in those admissions, while 19% say it should be a minor factor. Right? Because the country doesn't like this type of stuff. How strong is the opposition? Says Charlie. It's pretty strong. 2020, okay, even in California, they decisively rejected a proposal to repeal the state's ban on preferential treatment on race. There was a proposition out there that was going to keep Prop 209, which stated that the government and public institutions cannot discriminate or grant preferential treatment based on race, sex, color, ethnicity, national origin, etc. In other words, California said you can't give benefits to people or discriminate on the basis of race. And there was a bill that was saying we're going to revoke that so we can start judging people based on those characteristics. And Californians said that's nonsense. The move to repeal the ban on racial preferences lost by more than 2.4 million votes in California the same day that Biden won by nearly 20 points. Okay? In California. No We don't want to remove that stops the discriminatory laws. Keep it in place. And you can see the two percentages. 9.6 million people said no, leave it. 7.2 said, yeah, remove it. So what he says is all indications are that Judge Jackson would be an impressive choice. But Biden would have been better off putting the content of her character and her legal mind ahead of her identity. Which I'd actually like to know what she thinks about that. Would she agree with that? Probably. Seems like a pretty reasonable person. Here is, just to wrap up the show, more word salad from Miss Hirono, who's going to tell us about her qualifications that she's looking for in a judge. And pay close attention, folks. These people have no idea what they're talking about or what they're doing. She's going to say it would be very nice if this judge also based their rulings on law, not just their personal decisions and throwing out precedent and things like that. Bunch of word salad from our elected leaders in the Senate. So we've basically checked in with everybody around our government. It's pretty bad. Here is Miss Hirono.
And yet here we are. I'm curious, Senator, what you see in the confirmation clash ahead.
What I'm looking for is a justice who can be fair and impartial and who does not have an ideological axe to grind, which is what we saw, as far as I'm concerned, in President Trump's nominees, including to the Supreme Court. So, yes, I am expecting a fight. But there you have it, and I'm looking for someone who's going to be not only highly qualified, as all of the people that you already talked about are, but who really brings to the judiciary the kind of diversity that I'd like, that someone who will consider the impact, the effects of whatever decision-making is on people in our country, so that they're not making decisions just based on, which I would like them to base it on law, which would be nice.
Yes, it would be nice.
Precedent, and who are not eagerly trying to get rid of decades of precedent that would protect a woman's right to choose, for example, and voting rights, etc. But I'd like a justice who also will take into consideration the real-life impact of the decisions he or she will be making.
Yeah, where did and that sounds like a good North Star. I want to thank you on what is obvious.
He has no idea what to say to her because she didn't say anything. It was just vomiting out of the mouth. Yeah, that sounds like a good North Star, which is a good one. I think I'll probably use that in those meetings where, you know, those Zoom meetings where you just kind of set the phone down and like, are you there, Rob? And you're like, yeah, you can pick that up and use that guy's line. You say, hey, no, yeah, I've been here. I was listening the whole time. Yeah, that sounds like a good North Star. I think we can sort of circle back and orient around that. And love it. Appreciate it. Keep it up. All right. And set the phone back down and go back to making YouTube videos. So that, my friends, was it for the content. Let's take a look at some of the super chats that came in. Saw several of those. And I'm going to see if I can diagnose what is going on with locals because the chat's not working over there for some reason. Sorry, everybody. What is happening? Okay. So, all right. Let's take a look over on YouTube. We've got American Advocate, in parentheses, Latino, says, I don't care what race or gender. We need a constitutionalist and a qualified, somebody who's qualified. Biden administration is human trafficking. I'm an American with Mexican descent in Arizona. Well, hey, shout out to Arizona. You're right around the corner. And I agree with you, right? I agree with that completely. Qualified, competent, somebody who is capable works for me. The other things are, you know, I think more important as a threshold matter. Being more important as a threshold matter is it's their philosophy. They can do what they want with it, I guess. Barry Cream says, look how genuine Breyer is when he's talking compared to Joe Biden. Yeah, Breyer actually has some personality and a little bit of life in him, kind of bubbly, having fun out there, communicating with the press. A little strange. You know, I don't know. I don't know what I thought about it other than it's just a little bit weird. Molly F says, with a big one, thank you, Molly. It's a very nice and generous one, says, it is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Facebook shadow banned my post about the eugenics programs that instigated the Holocaust, government eugenics programs. Nuremberg Trials Part 2, say I. You know, somebody posted something very interesting about that on Locals the other day about this people setting up sort of common courts and indicting people. I think that's what that was. Very interesting stuff from Molly, and says, part Part 2, say I. President Roosevelt announced his court packing plan in 1937 at the beginning of World War II. Time is funny. Yes, right? Seeing history sort of rhyming, I think, is where you're going with that, Molly F. Yeah, and President Roosevelt did. Remember, if you go back and Google the switch in time that saved 9, the idea that these judges just sort of flipped after Roosevelt threatened them with packing the courts, and they just started rubber stamping all of his New Deal legislation. He's passing all these different alphabet agencies, right? Just expanded the size and the scope of the federal government like a balloon instantly. Spend, 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 spend. We have all these different alphabet agencies, and those were all getting struck down as unconstitutional. He said, that's fine. We're just going to extend the court. We're going to pack it up to 15, and we're just going to put a bunch of new judges on there. All the judges were like, oh, hold on a minute now. Everything started to change. They started stamping his new deals, and suddenly they didn't have to pack the court anymore. So I think Molly may be saying that there's a little bit of rhyming that's happening there. Thank you for that, Molly. We've got one. Little Panda Cub says Kamala probably got sat down as vice president to be nominated. Then she got kicked out of everywhere. Yeah. Kamala is having a rough go at this whole leadership thing. Not doing too good of a job at it. We'll see if that changes. I doubt it. Raider Gain says, as a black man, Kamala didn't claim being black until it was beneficial. That should disqualify her of this woke quota. Yeah, so that's an interesting take on that, Raider Gains. That's an interesting take. So I guess my next question to you would be, when do you think that it became convenient for her? Didn't claim being black, like sort of when did that persona change? I think you could probably pin that back to a certain time, she ran or something. Interesting. JDWJC says, if R's dig in their heels, you can't trust SC, ME, and AK sense. So yeah, South Carolina, Maine, and Alaska. So that's going to be Lindsey Graham. That's going to be Susan Collins and Murkowski. Yep, from JDWJC 11. Molly F says, in 1927, the Supreme Court case Buck versus Bell set a legal precedent that states may sterilize, if people minded. Can we, the United States, sterilize Biden? No. And I don't want the Secret Service showing up at my doors, right? We have to only object peacefully and politically on the internet. That's it. We can combat the Biden that way. I got to take a look at that case. I don't think we heard that case in law school. That's from Molly F. Ray Epps says, oh, Ray Epps is here. Ray, I want to know, did you talk to January 6th? Did you tell him about our relationship? I hope not. Says, hey, Rob, I know you changed the locals form so I couldn't expose you anymore. I thought we were friends. I even gave the January 6th commission a good word for you. Oh, great. I hope you will rethink this digression. Well, that's fine. I've been waiting for over a year now to get my letter from the January 6th committee. Now, if you recall, I was broadcasting from Scottsdale, Arizona on January 6th. You can go on YouTube and look it up. But for some reason, many people still speculate that I am a neo-Nazi. And they canceled my Discord, our Discord. It was not nice of them. I was right here. Ray Epps wasn't right here, punk. All right, let's see what else. Lull says, legal to pack the court per the Constitution. Yeah, they could. Yeah, they could totally do it, right? The actual number of judges is set by the legislature, and so they could change it if they wanted to. All right, and so let me see if I can figure out what's going on over at locals. Okay, sweet. Okay, so this is actually going to work, it looks like. Amazing. All right, so C. Rose is here. Says, hey, Rob, the United States government is excluded from the definition of employer under Title VII. Obviously, you know this already, but Biden can legally use his appointment and removal power to appoint a Supreme Court justice without running afoul of Title VII and discriminate on the basis of race. However, isn't the government the definition of an industry affecting commerce? The exclusion makes Title VII seem flimsy. Obviously, you know this already, but Biden can legally use... I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So you're saying that you could... This is a complicated question, C. Rose. So you're asking me, So here's, yeah, I think here the legal answer I think would be that I don't know. I think I know what you're asking, C Rose. I'm going to have to think about this and I'll have to get back to you. It's good. It's a great question. In other words, why isn't he violating any of the civil rights laws or equal protection laws as to hiring and firing? It's a good question. I don't know. We should probably talk to an employment lawyer about that. Liberty or Death says, Rob, isn't it amazing that Hirono is actually an attorney? Remember when she asked Amy Coney Barrett if she ever assaulted someone? I really believe that she was absent the day they taught in law school. She is, I don't really know what's up with her. But I don't think there's much legal background there at all. Liberty says, hey, Rob, hope all is well. Just wanted to swing by, say I don't agree with a lot of what Breyer has said. He has said a few opinions that were good, but in general, he's still too far left for me. More often than not, he seems to make the Constitution say what he thinks it should. Yeah, we heard some of his arguments. He says, that said, I think the White House did him dirty. The only reason the White House announced it is because they don't want the GOP. Should we retake the Senate to filibuster a nominee the way the Democrats filibustered Janice Rogers Brown? Of course, Justice Brown was the wrong kind of black. Interesting. Filibuster Janice Rogers Brown. Yeah, so I don't I got to look that one up. There is precedent for that, right? And look, there's precedent for this. I mean, Joe Biden was pretty hard on Clarence Thomas, if I recall correctly. So Janice Rogers Brown. Yeah, American jurist, United States Supreme Court, California Supreme Court, opposition made. Yeah, here you go. So let's pull this up. This is interesting. This is a good link here from Liberty. So this is Janice Rogers Brown. Janice Rogers Brown. Her nomination was stalled for nearly 2 years as part of Democratic opposition to appointments made by George W. Bush. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe she'd be on the Court of Appeals and be ready for a nominee, but right. Interesting. Thank you for that. Leafy Bug says Romney is VP. Great call there from Bill Kristol, who has been wrong about everything since at least 2001, maybe 1991. Who knows? Yeah, he's been pretty wrong for a long time. Soul Viking says, considering how disliked Kamala is and considering how much exposure Hillary Clinton has had recently, I wonder what the chance would be for Kamala to be given the lifelong appointment to the Supreme Court. I'd say basically zero. She's fits Biden rigorous primary qualifications. She's female and black. This would be a big consolation prize for her. Hillary could then be substituted as Biden's VP, then ascend to the presidency, either before the end of the term or be elected in 2 years on her own terms. Nothing would surprise me, especially with the devious Mrs. Clinton. That is a great one. I think we had a tweet yesterday on yesterday's show. Somebody else was sort of speculating that, that this was Hillary Clinton's long-term play. And Kamala was the only thing standing in her way. I'm not sure about it, but honestly, I think that, first of all, how old is Kamala Harris? So let's take a look. She's not Kamala Harris age. 57. All right. And so if you take a look at Judge, like Amy Coney Barrett, when she got elected, Judge Amy Coney Barrett age, right? So she just got nominated last time. She's 50. All right. So Kamala's about 7 years older than Amy Coney Barrett. So, not too far, actually. That's not too bad. I'd be curious what the other standard ages were. Let's see. Geomancy Games is here. It's been a long time. Says, hey, been a while. Just wanted to say that my cancer is being treated relatively well. Feels good to be able to live again a little. Awesome. That's great news, Geomancy. Really cool. Geo's over on Geomancy Games is on YouTube. You can subscribe over there. I appreciate your shows. I listen every day during treatments. My only thought on this SCOTUS debacle is I have no idea how anyone is comfortable being given a position simply because of what's between their legs or their skin color. You and I are near the same age, and it blows my mind that we had an entire generation who didn't give a rat's behind about race, but now your entire identity is based on things you cannot change. Also, come check out my new series where I talk about childhood video games. Love you, brother. That's awesome from Geomancy Games. I'm happy to hear that you're doing better, my man. I encourage people to go check out his channel on YouTube, Geomancy Games. Childhood games. I wonder what games you're covering. I played some childhood games in my day. We've got Heather, 3 Girlies is here, says Justice Breyer's speech may have been meandering, but I liked hearing it. He has such a great energy, and he's older than Biden. I didn't mind him messing up and being a bit hyperbolic with Civil War. When you said he was meandering, youngest girlie popped up and said, because he's old. Yeah, look, I try not to be, I don't want to be pejorative to elderly people, right? I mean it with the most reverence in the world. Like most of the people I hang out with most often are significantly older than I am, right? I'm kind of an old soul in that regard. And so I don't want to be, I don't want to be condescending and pejorative to that demographic. The Joe Biden thing is not just because he's an older man. He's also got a lot of other things going on that result in a totality of the circumstances situation that is problematic. All right. But yes, Judge Breyer is also old, and he is meandering around all over the place. Grouchy Old Cat Lady says, how many potential justices have not been confirmed? It's a good question. It's only a handful. There's a big one that really stands out. It's Bork, right? Remember Bork? I think that was under Reagan. Judge Bork was the big one that got turned down. That was, who was he nominated by? Ronald Reagan, yeah. That was a big one. Clarence Thomas, I think, was the guy who came after after Bork. And so that was a big one that sort of left a mark. We have Stookie says, so that's how the game is going to be played. Anybody who won't vote for the judicial nominee is going to be labeled as a racist misogynist. Character and political leanings cannot be considered in this case because a black woman must be on the bench regardless. Color and gender are the only factors necessary for the confirmation. Well, they said that that's not the case, right? They said it's also the qualifications, credentials, all of those other things, but this is certainly a threshold issue, right? Like it's a necessary condition in order for this to happen. Vientikis says, Rob, I'm trying to remember back when I was younger, but Sotomayor wasn't she a diversity back in the day, diversity hire? I don't know what that is. Belizean Grove? I don't know what that is. Vientikis. Your obscure references are Women's Social Club. I don't know. I don't know that they made any particular point with Sotomayor. I don't think Barack Obama came out and said, I'm going to nominate a Latina woman to the Supreme Court. Did he say that? I don't remember that he said that. John Delar says, I have a feeling Biden's decision is going to backfire after Kamala. Everyone knows picks like this are wrong. I'm exiting out of a couple things. Says, I also wonder about Manchin and Sinema. The more they go against their own party, the higher their approval rates go up in their own states. It may be very advantageous for them to criticize this pick. And I think there's truth to that, and they're going pretty hard against both of them. AOC has come out and said that she wants to primary Kyrsten Sinema, who is going to be running, I think, in like 4 years again, because she just got elected. But it's a good question. They've been beating up Manchin, they've been beating up Sinema. And what happens if one of them just flips and say, you know what, I'm not going to vote for this radical lefty. Arizona's pretty happy with Sinema right now because of what she did on the filibuster. Maybe she decides, yeah, I'm just going to sort of be that maverick person that Arizona was used to, inherit that old John McCain mantle. So they better be careful about this. They may alienate people from their own side, thinking that it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to be, in unison. Good question. Thunder 7 says, Rob, don't you think that term limits on the Supreme Court would end the panic by both parties when there was a majority on one side? If they were forced to retire after a long term, like 12 years, it would always ensure that both conservatives and liberals would appoint as party comes into power. I'm just worried that so much power resides from the highest court rulings, it can literally be a life-death situation. And maybe we'll find more of them not waking up with pillows on their faces or suddenly falling off balconies or shooting themselves in the head while driving off a cliff. I don't know about term limits. Just as a practical matter, right? You'd have to literally amend the Constitution. And I don't think there's anything that the whole country would be unified on in that regard. Thunder7 says, Rob, I don't have a problem with a black woman being appointed on the Supreme Court. It's time, really. But no way a leftist lunatic Marxist should be appointed, no matter what the race or color. Marxists don't believe in the Constitution, in individual rights, but in big totalitarian government, which is very oppositional of what SCOTUS and the Constitution represents. I agree with that statement, right? Somebody qualified who is a textualist, who believes in the Constitution. I think those are more important factors than skin color. That's just me. Vientica says, is this at least working? It is. Says, don't feel bad, Robert. The igniter in my oven busted. I can't seem to unclog a $20 printer nozzle. It's 2022, baby. Let's at least smile while technology breaks and hope all the technology that will keep us all in change will break us down, will break down even harder. That is from John Delar. And we have another one from Lovely Gemini. Says, Rob, wondering if you heard anything about this. Is it a dude in a basement or is this court a real thing? The one thing I know about this, it's either true or it's not. Let me pull this up. Okay, so here, this is over from Rumble, and it says, big pharma government leaders. Let me see if I can pull this up. Yeah, so this looks like it's a... this looks like it's a gentleman here. You can go watch this if you'd like, right? Big Pharma saying that a court convicts them, an international criminal court. And so I don't think that this would be anything that would be recognized by an actual official government entity. Okay, like this order, whatever this guy's reading, he's not going to come over to Arizona or to the United States and serve it on somebody, and like a court of law that has been sanctioned by a government is going to do anything with it. So I don't know what it is, but it doesn't look like anything that would be official to me. It's a good question, though. All right, and let's see what else we have. Any other thoughts from our friends on locals? Let me do a quick refresh. And... oh, yes, there's more. Okay, cool. So this is how this is going to work. Great. C-Rose is back. He's saying, yo, skip it. He's replied, skip it, Rob. If you don't know it, man, skip it. You're embarrassing yourself. Just move on to the next topic, all right? You're looking like a fool. He said, a Leafy Bug is in the house. Leafy Bug says, can a serving VP be nominated to SCOTUS and exercise the tie-breaking vote to confirm themselves? Surely the VP would have to resign first, so no tiebreaker. Maybe there's no specific law or constitutional provision forbidding it, but it seems so self-evidently wrong that some Democratic senators might prevent it from happening. Here's what I think might happen. If Kay is nominated, says White House makes a deal with Kamala, resign as VP, be nominated to SCOTUS. In return, a deal is made public. Kamala resigns. She's nominated, but she's not confirmed due to a lack of experience, which would be true, but the White House engineered the result with the senators. White House says, sorry, Kamala, we tried. Bye. White House nominates someone they want. We never hear from Kamala again. Joe Biden, turns out, is as nimble as a bumblebee, and he gets a basketball, and he's out there just draining free throws all day. Swish, swish, the economy turns around. America comes back in a roaring fashion, all because Kamala Harris is gone. It could happen. I'm not sure. I don't think most of that's going to happen, but it could be true. Oh, let's see. What is this? Okay. Oh my gosh. Jake from Oxford. It's here. Oh, he's in our community. Says, Rob, had a letter for you on Tuesday, but that was the day the forum was taken down. Gonna leave it for you here. Again, this is from Tuesday, so sorry for the change of topic, but keep insisting you want a letter from the White House. Let's see what we've got here, folks. Letter from Jake Sullivan. Oh, great. It's from Jake. Statement by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on the response, oh gosh, I'm in trouble, to Robert Gouveia or Gruler Esquire or R&R Law or Gruler Crypto or any other one of his fake names that he creates. January 22nd statement and release official. Robert, buddy, baby, come on, man. Yesterday you mentioned on your show canceled OSHA mandate withdrawn at around 3710 that, quote, us Oxford types would remove options for you normal peasants. I do remember saying that now that he mentions it. Yeah. Says, I find that comment very appalling and offensive. Then you say that the governor of New York thinks Fauci is Jesus, which I think is true. I think didn't she say, says, this is insanely incorrect. Jesus is not as good and powerful as Fauci. That's what Hochul thinks too. It says, as for the racist cult of Trumpers you call followers, I will give you my personal solution that has worked well for the masking mandates. I've included a photo of my last press release showing off my new gear. It only cost me $27,000 on Amazon. I'll send you the link because you're my buddy. That's the official statement from the White House. Press briefing room, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan sending me official memos, listening to the show. You know, Jake, can I tell you something, brother? This statement from Oxford, it's brilliant. I can't even argue with it. You're smarter than I am. I appreciate the memo. Thanks for alerting me about all of that, all of my mistakes. I'll make changes. Oh my gosh. All right. Thank you for that. Let's see what else we've got. We have another one from Jake. Said, Rob, here is the Amazon link that I was submitting. Oh, get your $27,000 face mask. That's Jake Sullivan. That's Jake Sullivan. That's the attachment from Jake Sullivan. It's Jake from Oxford. Thank you, Jake from Oxford. Good Lord. Vientica's Prime says, the Belizean Grove is the female counterpart of the Bohemian Grove, which is men only. They're social clubs for the ultra rich, which I'm sure no policies ever come out of. I remember it. So I do know that. I do know of the Bohemian Grove because that's where Alex Jones was, I think, infiltrating. Let's see. We've got Leafy Bug says Biden couldn't engineer a cunning plan to get rid of Kamala, but maybe Jake from Oxford might be able to pull it off. He is very smart, you know. And that press release, man, that was pretty brilliant. You know, I couldn't even think of anything to say in rebuttal to it. I get nervous when I'm talking to people from Oxford and Harvard and Yale. You know, they're better than us. And look, you know all the problems in the world that are happening? That's because we are not following their leadership hard enough. If we followed what they told us to do more clearly, with more vigor and more enthusiasm, there really wouldn't be any problems, right? And so we just have to keep that in mind here. On this show, you know, things can get a little bit out of hand. I can get a little bit crazy. But then we get Jake Sullivan from Oxford and Pete Buttigieg, and we get Ned from the State Department, and they set us straight. So thank you for that, everybody. And I think that's it for the comments and the questions from our friends over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Looks like it is. And so I want to welcome some new people who joined our community. Before we get up and out of here on the day, you heard from Lovely Gemini here today. Welcome to Lovely Gemini. We've got Wonder Girl 30s also in the house. We've got C. Jones 007 along with John, One Tough Chick. We've got Frank MC 42. We've got Ion Energy Wild Child, Alaskan for Trump, AZ Grayman, Mr. Shields is here, Nora MC, LG00 Angry Bear, Sassy Steph Ratbag, Ocean Lover, Free Minds here along with Humphrey's Dad, Shiraz 31, Faradex, The Brink, Lena, Piper _ along with Todd Hupp. And I think that is it for us for the day, my friends. I want to thank you for being a part of the show. We're going to be back here to do it all again tomorrow. Same time, same place, same location. 4 p.m. Arizona time, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody else have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.